my perspective, I'm not here to sell partnering. I'm just trying to provoke some thoughts around, could it be interesting at some point? And I'm looking at this potentially for you and your organizations to get other partners to work with you and represent you, or for you to represent other organizations in the marketplace as well. So the different side of the same coin, if you like. These are the areas that I thought would be interesting to really go through. So why are partners potentially interesting? And there are multiple different ways of looking at that. Some could be relevant, some could be completely irrelevant for you. The different partners and how they can add value in different ways to your organization potentially. How do you create an environment that will allow partners and yourselves to be successful? And how can you make yourself attractive if you want to work with organizations of different types? What are the sort of things that you might want to think about either now or at some point in the future, if that's a route that you want to go down? These are the reasons why I think most organizations, and again, this is from a technology organization, a software organization perspective, that most of the organizations I've worked with want to work with others. So firstly, win ratios. There is a whole raft of data around win ratios improving when you're working with partners because of the third perspective they can bring, the connections that they've got, the insight they can bring to opportunities. So that's largely why a lot of software companies work with organizations. The second big one is they can grow deal sizes. So in the organization I'm in, we know that when we're working with a partner, the deal sizes are typically twice as large than when we just sell by ourselves. So some good, compelling reasons why you might want to consider working with other organizations. The third area is around customer retention. Again, a lot of data around if you're plugging different technologies together, the overall solution becomes a lot more sticky for your customers. It's harder for them to churn, renewal rates are higher, the ability to cross-sell and upsell on the back of those projects increases as well. So some really good reasons why you might want to consider it. The other one is getting access to different buying centers or different personas in an organization. At Alteryx, where I am, we sell a software, but it's a generic software. We work with partners because they can bring their insight and their domain expertise maybe around a tax area. So we know very little around tax, but our tool can be used to help organizations transform their tax departments, and that's why we work with organizations, some very large organizations and some really small, but they've got domain expertise that is really relevant to a market segment that we're trying to get into, or we need some credibility around. And talking about credibility, we've got Accenture there. If you're in a software world, then most organizations want to work with Accenture, but I'm not saying that's the be all and end all. You sometimes have to earn the right to work with these larger organizations. And we do a little bit with Accenture, but we do more business with a lot of organizations that are smaller, but their brand and their credibility in the marketplace is really significant. So sometimes we aspire to work with the big ones, but you almost have to earn the right to get up to that point because of the profile of the organization you've become, or the deal volume that you're doing, or the deal sizes, or actually the value that those sort of size organizations can derive from working with you. And then the final part is, do you want to keep all of the resources inside your own organization, or is there value in you effectively outsourcing that to another organization? So at the moment, we're pushing a lot of our renewals through to partners so that we don't have that cost of sale managed ourselves. We do a lot of marketing with organizations because we don't want to have that cost ourselves. We don't have any professional, we have very few professional services people that implement our technology. We want that to be done by partners. And the reason we do that is the margins that we can make on our software are higher than the margins that we could get from a professional services approach. So there's lots of different reasons why an organization might want to partner. And some of these will apply in the other direction as well. So if you're either thinking of recruiting partners to help you grow, or you want to become part of an ecosystem from another organization, then these are probably the sort of things that they'll be looking for as well. Any immediate questions or thoughts on any of that? Yeah.
It's kind of related to whether you're professional services or not. How do you pivot from one to the other? Because typical models start with a problem and they resource them with people, but eventually then you have a technology to support that, right? Or you develop something. How does that pivot happen? And then how do you find partnerships? Because that seems like they're very different levels of expertise.
Yeah, so there's I guess there's a sort of build or buy question to be answered there. So some of the organizations that we work with use our technology and they build an asset, and we're a small little piece in the middle of what they're doing. They're delivering a business outcome to the customer that they're driving. And then as a result of that, they're building out assets that are repeatable. Now, some of those they can do themselves. So often people will, they might use Excel in some cases, or they use other software to build out a proposition and then take that to market. Other times they will want to partner with somebody depending on, I guess, the capability of their own services or their own solutions that they can take to market themselves. So it's a long-winded way of saying I'm not sure there's a clear answer for how you shift from a services to a solution area, but there are many organizations that we're working with that do want to do that. And they want to do that because they can build an annuity stream. They can have that run rate of business getting repeated all of the time, and it changes from a per hour model to a sort of asset-rich annuity stream, which is far better for predictability, probably better for profitability, certainly better for scaling and renewing the business as well. So probably one for a deeper conversation, but I'm seeing more and more organizations in that pivoting and working through how to do that. These are just, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just a couple of different types of organizations or the models that they use that could be of interest. And they all provide different value. So I've been challenged in the past when we've got sales leaders, not like Mark, who understands everything about partners, but other less informed people who are saying, right, we just want leads from partners. We just want them to bring us business. And we're working with a system integrator like a PwC or even a smaller one. That's not the model that they are most focused on. They're most focused on delivering value for their end customer and doing that in a very targeted way. We've got other organizations, technology providers, really focused on how they maximize their own revenue. So we work with a company called Snowflake. Their biggest focus is on driving consumption of their application. And we sit on their database and we help drive the consumption of their technology. So they love working with us, but they're never going to resell us. They're never going to implement our technologies. It's more of a co-sell type model. And as long as we recognize that, then we can look at what's the value we can get from that sort of model compared to working with a system integrator or working with a solution provider that resells our solutions as well. OEM type models are interesting where an organization can embed, in our case, our technology into a broader solution, and they white label it effectively. And all we do is sort of wait for that business to come in. Yeah, question.
In the top left one, the marketplace box, what does burn down mean?
So this is organizations like Amazon Web Services or Google. They typically have, they sell a subscription to an organization, and then that organization can buy things that burn down the subscription. And technology that sits on Amazon or Google or Microsoft helps burn through that. So we can, again, align ourselves to those sort of marketplaces, and it's good for their customers, and it's good for the Amazons of the world, and it's good for us because it becomes a sort of frictionless model that drives business for us and business for them as well.
Okay, thanks.
So just thinking about the value that you're trying to get, and then which of the organizational types could be of most interest for you. The system integrators for us are really good because they've got domain expertise around lines of business or industries or business processes that we just don't have. And again, it transforms our technology into a business outcome that they're driving for their customers that is far, far more compelling than if we just turn up and say, would you like to buy our technology?
Do you think it also adds a little bit of credibility to your solution being involved with those kinds of organisations?
Without question. So we work with organisations, again, not always the big ones, some smaller ones as well, who again have got domain expertise, and they write white papers around how they're able to take our technology and provide a business outcome for a particular industry or line of business. And that resonates really well because it does add credibility, particularly when you're talking to either a CFO or a head of HR or a supply chain expert, where we just don't have that credibility. We're just a technology sales organisation. So it does resonate really well, yeah.
We had that conversation earlier on, Lewis, didn't we, about your organisation, Lewis?
Yeah.
We had that working with Amazon. So similar kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that gives, do you think that gives your organisation more credibility? Do you think that helps?
Yeah, you're piggybacking off of other people's position. So yeah, credibility, yeah.
I think it adds some form of neutrality there as well, because of course we go and see a customer, the outcome is always going to be our technology, whatever their problem is.
Yeah.
Whereas if a third party is going, typically they're looking at things at a more independent way to say, right, what's your business issue? How can we resolve that? And here's a solution that might include our technology as well as others as well. So we talked about what's in it for one side of the equation. I think it's really, really important that we put ourselves in the shoes of the other entities that we're working with. And the way that we try and look at working with other third parties is, it's almost like we're selling to that entity. We're trying to understand their strategic goals and whether we can help them achieve their strategic goals. So sometimes that's growth, sometimes that's profitability, sometimes that's moving into a new market, sometimes it's developing a new proposition that they can build an annuity stream around. So we really need to understand what they're driving towards so that we can help them achieve their goals. And then there's a load of other things that they might be looking to do in terms of developing their business or adding value to their own solution area. So again, I'll talk about the value proposition in a little bit more detail. These are the sort of things that, in my experience, an organisation will want to understand if they're looking at a third party to work with. First of all, they want to understand, is it compelling for their customers? Is there a market demand in their customer base that they've got? Is there a specific demand from their customers that if they partnered with this organisation, they will be able to meet? Or a new area that they could get into that perhaps would be uncovered through working with this organisation? They also want to know whether the solution is really viable and delivers high quality. So I was a partner at KPMG for 5 years. Before I joined there, I came from a tech organisation. Very naively, I walked in there thinking, I'm going to be working for a bunch of accountants. All I need to do is show them the ROI, and they're going to be selling this stuff like there's no tomorrow. The ROI was probably fourth or fifth on the priorities that they had. The number one thing that they were focused on was customer satisfaction and customer retention, and being able to take innovative offerings to their customers that would raise their profile and raise their brand in the organisation. So I was coming from a very small tech company, and they loved us because we were able to be shown as an innovative organisation. So conversely, working with a big company doesn't always show innovation. They wanted to partner with smaller ones that show that sort of nimbleness, that niche solution, and we had a great relationship there. So sometimes it's not just about the ROI, it's other things that are driving them. What else we've got? Brand recognition. Yeah, we talked about innovation. Margin and profitability is key as well. So when we work with, say, a services organisation, we talk about the ratio of our software to their services. So if we sell £1 of our software, we typically talk about their services being in the range of £5 to £10. So they can think through, okay, well, if we're doing 50K's worth of business, then there's potentially a much higher ratio of the services that they focus on. And if we grow our business, then the market opportunity for them grows exponentially. So we really try to think through what's in it for them. What's the value for them, not just selling our solution, selling our technology. Value differentiation. We're trying to think through what are we doing with one partner that is different from another partner. And yes, you've got differences in terms of, if we do something with Amazon Web Services, it's different from what we're doing with a professional services organisation. But if we've got two professional services organisations, how are we differentiating? Is that purely by the customer segment we're going after? Is it by the joint value proposition that we're developing for customers, i.e., have we got an industry solution for financial services with one and an industry solution for public sector with another? Is it a line of business? Is it some other way that we can differentiate? Because if we don't do that, candidly, our own teams get confused about, well, how do we tell the difference between what we're doing here? We're confusing ourselves as much as we're confusing our partners or confusing our customers. So trying to differentiate them is key as well. And you can read through the other stuff. Trust and loyalty is something that partnerships, it probably sounds obvious, but they're absolutely built on. It takes quite some time to build that up, and it can be lost really quickly. If we've got sellers on our side that are doing things like, if a partner brought a deal to us and then we try and sell it direct, that does not go down well at all, as you can imagine. And conversely, if we've got a partner that we think is working with us and then they introduce a competitor, then that doesn't go down well from our side. So having that clear rules of engagement, expectations around how we're going to work together, what we are going to do together and what we're not going to do together, and being able to be clear and consistent around that as well. Two-way communication is pretty obvious. And then again, understanding their business and talking in their words about the way that they go to market as well. So we do lots of things that are very different from working with a system integrator to working with a reseller, again, to make sure that we're landing things effectively. And then finally, program benefits. Even now, in an organization that I'm in now, which is reasonably large, it's not the biggest, it's reasonably large, we're only just really getting to the stage where we've got a mature partner program. And most organizations don't have that. And I wouldn't suggest you go down that as your first route. But at some point, if you've got a level of consistency that you can show to the organizations you want to work with, or the organizations that you're working with, if they've got a program that you understand what the benefits are, what the consistency is, how you're engaged together, then that becomes really, really good. The other thing I would suggest is there are so many different organizations that businesses can be working with. We're always trying to make it as easy as possible for them to work with us versus others in the marketplace. So we might have a great solution, we might be growing very quickly, but if we're hard work to engage with, then many organizations will start to shy away from us. So we're always trying to make it as easy as possible for them.
Steve, where do you see cultural fit here? Because whether you're a small organisation, mid-sized, whatever, the cultural fit with your business and that partner, where do you see that in terms of here? Because I've seen that go well, I've seen that go badly.
Yeah, it depends on how you define culture, I guess. So we're a US technology company. You can imagine the cultural difference when we're selling into the Middle East or Scandinavia or somewhere else. There's the sort of geographic culture. There's also we're a software company that is quarterly driven versus some of our partners they've got an annual goal. They don't really care about month ends or quarter ends. We've got organizations that are really focused on customer success and doing things at the pace that the customers want. And we've got a sense of urgency in our business, and all of that puts together positive tension generally in the system. But I think you're absolutely right to recognize it. You know, small deals, big deals, fast moving organizations, slow moving ones. Some of our partners are really comfortable talking to senior level financial experts, and our sellers aren't. So they get a little bit sensitive about introducing some of our sellers into those conversations. There's loads of things to consider, and I don't think there's a sort of right or wrong way, but there's certainly really those softer things I think are as important as defining the joint value proposition, because those are the things that sort of undermine your ability to work together if there's not a reasonable fit there.
Yeah, I think that cultural thing is sometimes underplayed, because, you know, if we go back to the last event that we had here, we had a lady talking about retention and hiring.
Yeah.
She didn't mention CV once in an hour. If I look at some of these things here, a lot of these are kind of the hard benefits, the CV, if you will, about how you build.
Yeah.
It's some of those cultural things, some of those softer issues in terms of finding the right partners and actually making a successful partnership to expand your business. They're really important.
Really important, and investing in those relationships, as any relationship needs to be invested in, is really, really important. That those softer skills, you know, the networking that needs to happen between individuals, the trust that gets built up over time when you're struggling through a sales cycle and you're trying to work out what's the right outcome for not only the end customer but for both of you as well. And getting through those is really key. If you can do that successfully, I think you can build some really strong relationships and partnerships that will actually weather any issues and get you through some tough times. You had a question there.
Just on section 3, trust and loyalty, what's the rough correlation to price, both at the start of building the trust and loyalty and then later on, i.e. that end price of the product?
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
When it comes to obtaining that two-way communication, understanding the client's business, when it comes to the underlying product you're selling, how do you start the trust and loyalty? Is it based on price, or is there a different way that you can then engage in discussing the price of that product, that solution you're providing?
I would say we try and start with the value that we're delivering for the end customer and trying to understand that really clearly before we start getting into price, because otherwise it becomes difficult to justify the price in some cases because we don't fully understand the value that we're delivering for the end customer.
Yep.
Or sometimes we think we're selling this solution and they're actually buying this solution. It's the same technology, but actually we think they're going to be doing this and they're going to be doing that. And if we understand that fully, then we can really start to help add value in ways that potentially could be really useful to them, but not necessarily that cost prohibitive for us. So we might be able to add I don't know, some extra piece of technology, which actually doesn't really cost us too much, but could be a huge benefit for them if we understand what they're trying to do. Or we can work with another organisation to say, look, this customer or prospect is trying to do this, and we know that you've done that elsewhere. Let's introduce you and deliver some value that way. So we're always trying to get to the value rather than the price. And if we do that successfully, then we see the discount levels not being as high, and we're seeing decision cycles being able to be quicker as well, because the justification is pretty clear in people's mind. The business benefit is very clear as well. If we don't do that and we rush to get to the price, then oftentimes that doesn't necessarily end well, and then we do get into a price discussion, which is not great when you're working with a procurement organisation. It becomes harder. You had a question?
Yeah, let's say we've got this fantastic little mousetrap, right, which is a minuscule bit of the whole requirement of a global company, let's say a bank or something like that, right? There's no way the startup can partner with a big bank, right? However, are there some sort of intermediary people to partner with to open those doors? Is that a way of working and getting a partnership going?
It absolutely is, but I have seen small technology companies being embraced by banks because they've got something that is so specific to the business issue that an organisation is willing to invest, and there's an individual in the bank who has spotted that and is able to do that. What we tend to see is that organisations there's this sort of pendulum that swings backwards and forwards around rationalising the organisations they want to work with, and then swinging the other way to, we've got to be more innovative, we've got to be working with organisations that can bring us more insight and flexibility, and it depends where they are on that pendulum, if you like, as to whether they're even open to that conversation. But I know that many banks that I've seen and other organisations, they like that innovation. It's just dependent on whether their risk and compliance will allow them to purchase from a smaller organisation, or whether they would need to go through another technology vendor who would be in the middle and take some of that risk, if you like. And there are many organisations that can do that and can handle that sort of go-to-market and represent smaller vendors in the marketplace. Sorry, there's a voice somewhere.
I think it was me.
Oh, you, Mark. Sorry, you had a question.
I was going to ask about, and it's probably under your trust and loyalty strand, about converting. Like, I see it a bit like knowledge, where you can have it tacit knowledge locked in one person's head, or like the tribal knowledge of the whole company.
Yeah.
like around partnering, my experience of it has been that there's been like a couple of relationships that are like the linchpin of the whole thing. So is there like a beyond just like raw contracts, right, that like lock you into partnering? Have you got any advice on sort of helping to convert those relationships that are sort of one-to-one?
Yes.
I see it, not even like, so I work in the public sector, right? And so we have to hit quotas of partnering. Like that's the rules. We have to partner. The government won't buy from us if it's like, well, unless we're BAE, right? So, you know, if we find that like people go through these companies like ours in cohorts, not even individually. There's like a pack that will move around together and flow between them. And so you'll have like maybe 5 people on each side that have kind of got a partnering agreement together, but then they exit and move on to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's so when we have that occasionally as well, where you've got a partner account manager who works very well with their peer on the other side, and then one of them leaves, and then it starts to fall apart. One of the
it's kind of
things,
that cultural thing.
yeah, one of the things that we're doing is sort of having multi-level relationships, and we can't do it with every partner because not all of them are big enough to do that. But for some of them where we've got, you know, a sales leader like Mark, for example, who would sponsor the relationship, somebody from our marketing team would engage with their marketing counterpart, somebody from our technology team would engage with their solution architects or people who are more technically savvy, as well as a partner team. So you don't have one single point of failure, you've got multiple relationships which may not be able to carry things on to the same level that they were, but you de-risk things a little bit. And you're getting different insights from people, different engagement, different feedback that's coming back to your organisation as well, which is really useful. Yes.
Good. Just, I suppose, flowing on the back of that, at what point would you put in a formal partnering agreement, and what style would you advocate? Because I've spent hours negotiating before you've got started on it.
Exactly, and the thing that I would say is not having a partner agreement until we've got some idea of the sort of business plan and the joint value proposition. Because I've been in that same scenario. I've made so many mistakes, I can bore you for hours on stuff that doesn't go well. So you spend days, weeks, months trying to get to a partner agreement, then at the end of it, nothing happens. And you think, my God, why didn't we just make sure that we were connected at the right level, or we really understood the value proposition? So the partner agreement for me is a necessary evil, and I would try and keep it as simple as possible, because once it's signed, unless something goes catastrophically wrong, nobody looks at it. And it's more around making sure that you've got that cultural fit, you've got the business case and the value proposition. So we know that we're driving, in our case, software. That's how we're going to measure success. But what's the partner driving? What's going to be important for them? Is it professional services, or is it getting into a new market, or some customer sat scores? How are we making sure that we've got a scorecard, if you like, that will allow us to have a high degree of comfort that we're driving to the right outcome? And then if we've got that, then we can sign the partner agreement and say, right, this is what terms and conditions we need to step into.
Like a joint business plan.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes.
So if there's an organisation in a position where they're new in the market, don't have that existing relationship, how do they go about making that initial connection with a potential partner where there are obvious synergies, but the relationship doesn't exist?
So we sort of scan the market and see who's out there. You know, if we wanted to push into public sector, for example, and we don't have partners in the public sector, then some people will know who the partners are that they want to work with, or they look on the public sector roster and who's on the various frameworks and try and understand it that way. Or we go and talk to our customers and say, well, who are you working with? Who are you leaning on for advice, or who are you purchasing from, or who do you see in the marketplace that you trust and we can work with? So there's lots of different ways that we can look at that. A really interesting thing we're starting to do now is to use ChatGPT. So we're looking at that and saying, tell me who the most strategic providers are to HSBC. And then they list out a whole raft there. And then we say, okay, of that one, what are the strategic goals of this organization? It gives you a list of the strategies and the goals that they've got, and then we can have a really informed conversation with them and say, okay, we know you're doing this, we know you've got a drive to do certain things, we feel like we've got a solution that will help you achieve that, and it becomes a lot easier rather than doing loads of desktop research. So we're trying to use a little bit of AI or machine learning as well as our own knowledge of the marketplace as well.
Thank you.
Excuse me, is there a technical problem calling people partners from a legal perspective? So we use a memorandum of understanding and avoid using the word partners because that could have some implications.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does. It depends on the context and the environment that you're in. So when I was at KPMG, individuals were partners, and therefore we had strategic alliances with other organisations. So I'm trying to use a generic term, but you're absolutely right. There are certain words that you can or can't use with some organisations because it does imply something that you may not want it to imply. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
We call them teaming agreements.
Teaming agreements. Yeah. Yeah. Memorandum of understanding, joint business plans, all sorts of different things. Strategic alliances. Lots of different things. Wow, I'm struggling to read this, and I'm right here. So value proposition we talked about, but really clearly a three-way value proposition. So we understand what's in it for us. We know why we want to work with this organisation. They've got clarity about why they want to work for us. But do we have clarity on what we're going to deliver to end customers? Are we really clear on how we're going to provide a business solution to them? And we can articulate it very clearly in the roles that each of us play. So I think if you get that foundation right, things tend to go reasonably well. I've had many instances where we skipped right through other things and we don't have that nailed down, and we keep on coming back to it because we haven't got it nailed, and it causes a lot of confusion. Predictability and ease of doing business we've talked about. So again, having those rules of engagement, that clarity of understanding, things like documenting with your partners. When we're working on this account or this opportunity, how are we going to work together? This is what we expect of you. This is what you expect of us. Are we completely clear about that? It sounds really basic, but sometimes if you don't have that, 2 months or 6 months down the line, you're having arguments because you said, well, I assumed you were going to be doing this. And they say, oh, no, we were never going to do that. We were going to do this. And it just causes a lot of confusion. Internal alignment and ownership. This is really key. It's like going through a change management process, I think, where you've got some people in your organization that desperately want to work with other organizations, partners, strategic alliances, whatever you want to call them, and you've got some that absolutely do not. And getting clarity around what are the things, if we are going to step into a partnership with another organization, what are the commitments that we as an organization need to make, and what are the sacrifices that we need to make as well? Because sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it. Sometimes you do have to give up things that you may not necessarily feel really comfortable about, but you're doing it for the greater good. So things like us, we don't have a professional services organisation. We're not going to build one. That was a conscious decision. If we had built it, then potentially there would be some conflict with some of our partners who want to deliver those services. Change management, sort of sticks and carrots as well, making sure that we're celebrating successes and calling out bad behaviour where that's needed, having leaders sponsor things, having leaders be engaged, all of those standard things for embedding change in the organisation. And then finally, the metrics of success, being really clear on those, and not just when we want to generate £500,000 worth of business with this organisation, but what are the leading indicators of that success? So yes, it's signing a partner agreement, but it's also how many people on their side do you want to have trained? How many demand generational marketing activities do you want to drive? All of those sort of things, which you can look at early on to say, yeah, I feel good about this. I feel comfortable that we're going to head in the right direction. And I think that is, yeah, so this is really just some thoughts to think about. Why would you want to partner? Maybe there's no value for your organization at the point in your maturity or life cycle that it makes sense for you to partner, or you've got a solution that actually there's nothing more that can be added around that. And that's great. So really being clear on the why you want to do this. When do you want to do it as well? Because it might be that you want to do it when you're a certain size, or you've got a certain profile, or you want to expand into a different market, or you need to get bigger deals, or whatever it may be. But that the why and the when is really key, I think. And sometimes it will be no, and that's absolutely fine. And then the who. Who do you want to work with? And then sort of circles back to the why do you want to work with them? Because again, we jump up and down and get excited about, well, we could do stuff with IBM or Accenture or Amazon Web Services or whoever. But when you drill into it, we're not clear on the why. Well, we like their brand. Well, that's great, but is it really going to drive the business outcomes that you're looking for? And then finally, how? How are you able to create that environment that will allow a partnership approach to thrive?